Done. I can do this. It's just me and Lois. And no weird Superman stuff to ruin it.
Boo.
Nope.
Recently I finished... Wait, hold on a second. There, that's better. Anyway, recently I finished Season 1 of my adventures with Superman, and honestly, it is just... okay. Yeah, just like I predicted before the show came out, it's pretty mid. And over the course of this relatively short video, I'm going to try and explain exactly why. And this should go without saying, but this video is going to be chock full of spoilers, so if you haven't seen the show and you really want to, then this is your chance to leave. With that out of the way, let's get started with our first category. I'm just gonna come right out and say it, 90% of the character designs look like shit. Not only is there rampant race swapping, the reason behind which I talked about in a different video, but the people who worked on this show made some really interesting decisions with the characters. The most obvious problems are with the villains. In this show, Superman's rogue gallery consists of Deathstroke, Parasite, Livewire, Silver Banshee, Roughhouse, Mist, Mixospitalik, and the gender-swapped Heatwave? The other ones are pretty bad, but this one just doesn't make sense. Why bring in a Flash villain when there are tons of other Superman villains to use? And why the gender swap? It's just weird. I mean, if they wanted a female villain with fire powers that bad, Volcana's right fucking there. Anyway, the designs for the villains have gotta be the most boring thing in the entire show. The first thing I noticed about the villains when I was watching the show was literally everything is tech. Silver Banshee's powers? Tech. Livewire's powers? Tech. Parasite's powers? Tech. Even Mixie's powers come from tech, which is just wrong. There seems to be a weird obsession with making every villain's power tech-based when they really don't need to be. It makes their characters much less interesting. I wouldn't even have as much of a problem with it if the designs at least looked cool, but they don't. The suit designs are some of the most bland pieces of shit I've ever seen. I know some of you are okay with them, but you can't sit there and tell me with a straight face that they hold a candle to what the characters are supposed to look like. And don't even get me started on this abomination. The only real exception is Parasite, and even he's on thin ice. And as for the characters themselves, I would talk extensively about them, but there isn't really anything to talk about. As characters, they're all pretty generic and they don't really have much going on. These three want to steal shit, this one wants to sell weapons, this one also wants to steal shit, and this one's pissy because Superman's stronger than him. Whoop-de-doo. Somehow they even made Mixospitalik boring, but we'll get back to that later. I think one of the biggest problems with this show is that they don't spend enough time giving the villain characters, you know, character. While they do have their own issues, the protagonists don't really suffer from this problem. It's the villains that really need the most work. Moving on. The animation is alright. It's pretty standard for what it is, but there are still a couple of issues. First off, the whole anime style doesn't really fit. It comes off kinda weird, but that's more of a personal thing, I guess. But there are other issues that are more objective. Throughout the show, there are really weird issues with the animation. Most of the time, the animation flows pretty well, but there are also these random bits where the animation gets really choppy.
I've got one heck of a story for you. Pew pew! No, don't do that to your boss. This is it. This is the story that'll make you a real reporter. You can do this.
Lois, you lied. And Jimmy, they have problems.
There's also the occasional instance of the animation not matching up to the audio.
I'm back! Yeah, that train's gonna crash. Yeah, I'm gonna be late. Cover me until I get in. Thanks!
And last but not least, they have one of my pet peeves, continuity errors.
Hey, hello.
Hey!
My name is...
Clark! Oh, those repairs you did on the back door are wonderful. Oh, and I have the 3 dozen donuts you wanted to eat all ready to go. Such a good appetite, this one.
No, see, it's not all for me.
But he gets the sprinkles all over. That's why we made him the Bib.
Well, today's my first day of work, and
Honey, Clark is here.
Good man. Get his bib.
Thank you.
I found Jimmy's phone.
This is the moment, bird watchers. Tonight, we find... What's that? Did you hear that? Is it a...
While by themselves these things seem kinda small, I find it a bit baffling that a large production company with a presumably high budget either didn't catch these issues or didn't bother to fix them. At the very least, it speaks to the amount of effort that was put into the finer details of the show. Unsurprisingly, there are several issues with how the characters and the episodes as a whole are written. For example, let's talk about Superman himself. But first, brace yourself, cause I'm about to say something nice about this show. I genuinely like how they characterize Superman sometimes. They get one of the most important things about him right. He's a nice guy. He rescues cats from trees, he cleans up the mess after he finishes a battle, he helps little girls find their mommies. It's pretty basic stuff, but it's nice to see Superman doing it for a change. And it was one of the only parts of the show that I genuinely liked. Now on to the stuff that I didn't like. And yes, some of these are nitpicky, but fuck you, that's my job. Nitpick number 1. His mom should have made his first suit. In the show, they have the suit kind of materialize onto his body in that Sailor Moon transformation I showed you earlier, and I really don't like it. It's a nice little detail in his origin to have his human mother make his first suit with material she found in the pod he came to Earth in. It just feels more personal than having some Kryptonian tech fabricate the suit onto his body. The show does end up giving us a little something by having Clark's mom give him the pair of trunks that he wears over his suit, but it's really not the same. Moving on from the nitpicky stuff, the general writing behind each episode as well as Superman's character is kinda touch and go. On one hand, the writing is pretty standard, not phenomenal, not terrible, just pretty good. But on the other hand, there are several glaring issues that appear every now and again. And since this video is already running pretty long, I'm gonna try and get through them as fast as possible. Number 1, Superman should have control of his powers. In the show, we see that Clark is not only gaining new abilities, but he's still learning to fully control the abilities he's had since he was a kid. And that really doesn't work when you consider the implications. A huge part of Superman's character in the comics is that when he was a kid, he had to train himself every day to gain control of his powers. He had to learn how to manage and control his abilities every second of every day, because if he didn't and he slipped up even once, it could mean the end of somebody's life. So you can't have all these cute little scenes where he's nervous, emotional, or just absent-minded and accidentally uses his super strength. Because if he can lose control of his powers just because of a little stress, inevitably somebody's gonna get killed. Number 2, Mixie is boring. See, told you we'd get back to it later. Mr. Mxyzptlk is introduced in one of the last episodes of the season, and it's one of the most forgettable episodes. Long story short, Mixie tricks Clark into helping him do a bunch of stuff that leads him to a base where alternate Lois Lanes are holding his hat. You see, because of this weird obsession with making everything tech-based, the writers made it so that most of Mixie's power comes from this hat or headpiece that he has. It's kinda hyped up to be a big deal, but when he gets the hat, he doesn't really do much. And for some reason, they did away with the whole making him say his own name backwards makes him go away thing. That was the most interesting thing about interactions with Mixie. He causes a bunch of mischief, and Superman has to use his own wits to trick Mixie into going away. But now he's pretty much just like any other villain who's after some MacGuffin that'll make him more powerful. It's way less interesting than what Mixie's usually like. Number 3, sometimes the writing is just stupid. There's quite a lot to cover in this section, so let's make it a lightning round. In episode 1, there are these robots that come in these big crate containers, and we're shown that the robots can be controlled with a button pad that's on the side of each container. But for some reason, we're shown that you can make the robots do very complex actions like targeting specific people and attacking them with just one button. In episode 4, a man is thrown out of a window by Parasite and Superman catches him, but instead of bringing him to the safety of the ground, he brings him straight back into the window that he was just thrown out of, despite it clearly being dangerous inside the building. In episode 5, Lois has handcuffed herself to Superman right before people start attacking him, and instead of simply breaking the handcuffs and moving Lois out of harm's way, or simply shielding her with his body, he does this. Also episode 5, Lois pulls an Amber and is mad that Clark didn't tell her he was Superman this entire time, even though he had no obligation to.
Please, let me explain.
You lied to me, Superman!
I didn't lie to you, I just didn't tell you everything.
A secret is another type of lie!
Lois, you have no idea what's going on in this city right now.
Then tell me!
You hated Superman. You said he was a liar, and you were gonna find and publish all of his secrets. My secrets.
I would never do that to you. I had no idea it was you until after the gala. How could you think that?
You jumped off a roof. I don't know what to think.
You kept this from me, and I'm your... I don't know what we were going to be, but that's all over now.
In episode 6, robots are shooting at Lois and Clark, and instead of picking Lois up and running with her to get her away from the danger, Clark runs beside her. Episode 7, Lois finds this computer ball on the alternate Lois Lane ship and cannot figure out how to open it, even though later on we see that it is opened simply by pressing a very distinct button. Also in episode 7, when Mixie gets his crown thingy, he makes a bunch of random portals that connect to each other. There are several dozen of them and the connections seem to randomly shift. Despite this, they beat Mixie by having Lois come out of a portal behind him and take his crown off, even though there was really no way of knowing which portal would lead her there. Episode 8, Clark is using his super hearing for the first time and is helping a bunch of people that he hears in trouble. We occasionally get to hear what Clark is hearing, and for some reason, every single time that we do, there's this guy who's clearly in distress saying,
No! No, please!
but Superman never goes to help him.
Okay, General, where are you?
Episode 9, Task Force X breaks out of containment and Deathstroke comes to help stop them. But instead of wearing the supersuit that we've seen him wear several times, he's wearing his plain clothes to stop the supervillains in. In episode 10, a chunk of kryptonite ends up on the Kent farm and the presence of it activates robots that are on the ship that Clark came down in. And for some reason, bringing kryptonite close to the robots makes big crystals grow out of them, which makes no sense. Lightning round over. Like I've said several times before, this show is painfully mid. There's a bunch of issues, but there are also a bunch of things that the show does pretty well. In Season 2, they should really focus on fleshing out the characters more and giving the episodes more substance. One of the things that I noticed when I was watching the show is that nothing really happens, or at least it doesn't feel like anything happens. I could sit down and watch 5 20-minute episodes in a row and afterwards feel like I only sat down 2 minutes ago. The show is chock full of references that don't really add anything and are clearly only there to make the viewing audience go. The show often prioritizes cute little character moments and fan service over giving the story substance and making it make sense. Overall, I can see why people enjoy this show, but it's really nowhere near as amazing as people are saying, so I'm giving it a 5 out of 10.